everyone is a complimentary 1-hour private telephone session so that everyone can transform their lives, their relationships, and their future. And Susan Allan says if you do 100% of what works and 0% of what doesn't, you really can indeed have the life that you always dreamed about. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. So thrilled to be here.
Oh, this is going to be exciting because this is going to be so self-enriching for our viewers. So let me start off on these questions that we've developed. I know, Susan, that the human suffering is easily transformed if we do learn a few simple skills. And so please explain to us how this ending suffering is easy.
We suffer because we believe certain things are true, and usually they're not. When you learn this skill that I'm going to teach you tonight, you shift from believing these miserable stories you tell yourself are true, believing that the natural outcome of these miserable stories is more suffering, and you start to be able to turn this around until you actually become able to avoid this kind of reaction altogether. And in fact, you may believe you're thinking. You're not thinking, you're reacting. So this show is a very, very important one because it actually teaches you how to think.
Oh, I love that. Now, what about noticing when we notice our story to do with suffering? How can we transform that?
So what is the story you tell yourself? You tell yourself that nobody's ever going to love you. Do you tell yourself that your marriage is never going to last? Do you tell yourself that you'll never get a promotion or a raise? Do you tell yourself that the promotion or the raise you get are limited to some other story about them? Do you tell yourself that you're never going to have perfect health? Do you tell yourself what? These stories that you tell yourself are the crux of your suffering. Now, even if you have proof that they're true, you don't want to live in that place forever, so there are things to do about it.
I love that. I just heard something recently, Susan, that was great. It was, I am happy, I am excited, I am, positive affirmations that whatever follows the I am, it shows up, it follows you, just like you've been telling us. I thought, how simply put. I just thought I'd put it out there. Just think about the I ams.
And it's very interesting that a lot of people who call me for a free session, they say, but I'm not happy right now. I don't want to lie about it. Well, if you understand certain universal truths, then you know that saying that you're unhappy, this so-called authenticity that people feel is so crucial, is in fact your worst enemy. Because you're actually perpetuating, forwarding, encouraging, adding to, multiplying this misery. So what Gigi's just said is very, very important, and I would recommend it.
Oh yeah, I am blessed. I'll take that
any
time of day or night.
Exactly. I am lucky.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes luck, which makes no sense, but luck can be the difference between a great life and a horrendous one.
Yeah, there's nobody luckier than that person that thinks they are so, right?
Yes.
Oh, I love that quote.
Yes, that's true.
Now, to go on with these questions, aren't some stories really, whether they are negative or they're positive, are they true? The stories?
Well, sure. Some stories are not stories. They're reality, and you have plenty of proof that it's true. Right now it is a certain time. It's about 10 minutes past 8 in California. That's just a fact. We are in Santa Barbara, California. That's a fact. We're at the TV studio, etc. So these are just facts, but it's what I would say about it that would make me feel happy, or what I would invent about it that would make me feel sad. So it's the things that make you feel sad, which are not facts. There's certain conclusions where you've connected the dots in a certain way, and what you end up with is some misery. So it's always looking at the stories you tell. I'll never, I'll always, I should, I shouldn't, he should, he shouldn't, she should, they shouldn't, whatever. Those are the stories where there's an I'll never, I'll always, he should, he shouldn't, I should, I shouldn't. Those are often the way that people phrase stories when they haven't been trained by me, first of all, and they have this really dangerous, even lethal habit of self-generating suffering.
And sometimes the words that we say we're not even paying attention to.
Often. I mean, very often. I saw someone on Sunday who's not a friend, she's an acquaintance. I saw her and I thought, oh, I'm wondering why I'm not more friendly with her. She seems this, that, and the other thing, which are, benefits in my eyes. And then I listened. And in, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, she said these two such negative things. Oh my goodness, let me get out of here.
That kind of reminds me of when somebody enters a room, if people scatter, or what happens, or do they run up to welcome them?
That's right, exactly. You know what to do if you watch them scatter, and you know what to do if you see them welcome them. Yeah.
Now, explain to us what the 4 questions of inquiry is, please, Susan.
So the 4 questions of inquiry is an exercise that I created, and in part it's based on the questions that Byron Katie was given in a spiritual breakthrough she had. And I do want to tell everybody that. At the same time, the results you get if you do this the way I teach it is completely different from the results you get if you just study the work of Byron Katie. And the difference is that my intention for you is that you eliminate negative stories for the rest of your life, starting with this one you're telling right now. You do the exercise, you do the turnaround, you see that there is a turnaround, you're done with that story. You're done with it. You don't get to retread misery. And the 4 questions are, is it true? What evidence do I have that it's true? How do I feel when I tell myself this story? How would I feel if I no longer believed this story? And then the turnaround. And the turnaround, if you're studying with me, it must be more peaceful, more true, and therefore more powerful. It can't be 1 or 2 of those. It's got to be all 3. More peaceful, more true, and therefore more powerful. So this is how you change your brain. This is how you change your mind. This is how you evolve. It's not the only skill I teach for that. It's one of many. And it is a very important one. If you're somebody who's going along having a perfectly nice day, and then suddenly you're in a trough and you don't know how you got there. And then you're going along and you're having a perfectly nice day, and then boom, your energy drops. So important.
I like the reality of how you transform for serving our own life energy.
Absolutely.
Force. Now, when we do learn the 4 questions of inquiry, how does that change our stories?
Well, there's always a more peaceful, more true, and more powerful story. Always. And maybe you can't get to complete peace in one exercise. Maybe you have to turn the story around and then turn that one around and then turn that one around. And maybe in the beginning you have to do 10 of these. When I work with a client, I will work with them during the session. Then I will ask them to continue to do it every day for the next few days until we have our next session. And I ask them to send me an email with the exercise. What's the story, the 4 questions and what their answers were, the turnaround, and then the next one and the next one. Now maybe they completely transform it. They don't ever have to think about whatever happened in that marriage. They don't have to think about what happened with that boss. They don't have to think about what's going on with that neighbor. They're at peace. Great. Well, what's another area in your life maybe where you're not completely at peace? Because when you first learn this exercise, I can pretty much guarantee that you're going to find that there are a lot of things in your life that aren't yet perfectly transformed.
It's like looking on the other side of the coin.
You bet. That's exactly what it is.
Oh, I love that. Now, I know that you've mentioned that we have to avoid telling the same story again and again. And how do we do this? And why is it so crucial?
Well, the way that you stop telling the same story again is once you do the turnaround, you know that you are enjoined from ever telling that story again. That's the purpose of the exercise. It's a commitment. I mean, you're not going to pay your rent or your mortgage twice that month. Maybe you're going to prepay next month. But you're not going to say, okay, well, that was so much fun, I'm going to do it twice. Of course not. You're not going to go to the doctor and say, well, I really liked getting that inoculation, give me another one. So if there's something that you have to endure, you don't want to double dip on it. You want to have it as infrequently as possible. And that's what is true about these miserable stories. If this story is, I'll never have someone who adores me for the rest of my life, or I'll always have somebody who cheats on me, I will never have all the money that I've always longed for, or the money I used to have coming in every month, whatever it is. These are stories. They don't help you. They really are your enemies. And I could tell you 5,000 stories. The ones I mentioned just now, those are common stories. So they don't work, they're not helpful, and you need to get rid of them.
I love it. So one of the things that I adore about you, Susan, is you help people with the battlefield of their mind.
The battlefield of their mind. I love that. Wow.
Yeah, we'll
Cool.
focus on that in the future, right?
The battlefield of their mind. And then the battlefield of their life.
Oh.
And hopefully not the battlefield of your marriage or your family.
Oh, jeez.
That's when they call me. I can hear the guns in the background. I can hear the bombs going off.
Okay, well, help us understand what the cause of addiction is that you've discovered that really affects these stories.
All addiction is caused by the same things. It's caused by an insufficiency of joy, and instead people drift into fear and or anger and or sadness. And it's also caused by an insufficiency in avoiding danger, which is actually a brain wiring thing. So it's a biochemical thing and it's a brain wiring thing. That causes all addiction. But what we can see and hear, if we have friends who suffer from addiction, or in my case, clients who've been through it and now are on the other side, or their family members are, we know when they're feeling frightened, we know when they're feeling angry, we know when they're feeling sad, because they look a certain way and they sound a certain way. And that is the precursor to all addiction. So you can learn the stories they tell, you can teach them this skill once you've learned it, and so nobody has to suffer for the rest of their lives anymore.
No suffering, imagine that. Just fill yourself up with joy.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Imagine.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
It's possible.
Yeah, you bet.
Actually, we have a friend that on every hour, the top of the hour, does little joy jumps, right?
That's right, he does.
If you can't get off your tush, well, you can just celebrate it another way, but
That's
it
right,
makes you
yeah.
conscientious of it.
And feeling joy.
That's right. Now, Susan, please show us how to do the 4 questions about a financial problem.
Okay. So now this is a very important thing. Everyone doesn't live in miserable stories, but sometimes people live in artificially joyous stories that aren't real and that are going to come back and bite you. So that's not what tonight's show is about. Tonight's show is about the people who tell negative stories and they wonder why things don't work out very well. Okay? So a negative financial story might be that the person says to himself or herself, my boss is going to fire me. Ooh. Negative people say this kind of stuff all the time. And eventually they get fired. So they don't do a great job, they feel hopeless, they feel so despondent they don't even come to work on time. When they see their boss, they act in a kind of funny, off way. And self-fulfilling prophecy. So if somebody comes to me and they say, how am I going to turn this story around? What's your story? My boss is going to fire me. Question number 1, is it true? Yes, no, or maybe. And you definitely want a pen and pad right now, or an iPad. You want to be able to make notes while I'm talking to you. Because the whole point is when you get off, this show, you want to be able to do something about your own stories, right? So, is it true? Yes, no, or maybe. Well, let's say he believes it's true. Okay, question number 2. What evidence do you use when you tell yourself the story? Well, 2 people who were hired after me have already been promoted. 1 person was fired last week, so I know it's possible to get fired. My boss never tells me how much he appreciates what I do. My boss looks at me funny. Okay, no, that's not evidence. What exactly does your boss's expression on his face look like that you call he looks at you funny? We go into that. So the person is now sliding down into feelings and they're not in facts and data anymore. That's how they got into a life of telling miserable stories, because they didn't have a habit of looking at the facts, the figures, the dollars, and the numbers. So he says, okay, so I'll forget about my boss's expression. My boss has taken most of the employees in the office out to lunch in groups, and I haven't been included. Okay, good. So you're getting a lot of evidence, right, that the boss is not happy with this employee. But we still don't know if the employee is going to get fired. We don't have that evidence yet. The boss hasn't said a lot of things that he might say that other bosses have said, like, you need to hit this number by next Wednesday in order for you to keep this job. Those kind of things. Or, I told you you had to do such and such this month, and as far as I know, you haven't done it, you've got 1 more week. So those are the kind of things a boss might say to someone that would be, the writing's on the wall, the second shoe's going to drop, be careful. But none of that in this case. So question number 3, how do you feel when you tell yourself the story that your boss is going to fire you? You're going to get fired. And 3 feelings: frightened, anxious, frustrated. Okay. Now normally when people are learning this, they don't know feeling words from stories. How do you feel when you tell yourself the story? Like my boss. Okay, that's a story. I want a feeling: frightened, angry, sad, disappointed, worried. So then you get back on track. Okay, question number 4. How would you feel if I could show you that this story isn't even true? Well, I would feel like my boss doesn't hate me. Okay, that's a story. But how would you feel? Frightened, angry, sad, happy, joyous, peaceful. Oh, well, I'd feel hopeful. I'd feel relieved. And I'd feel like I could sleep at night. I'd feel relaxed. Great. So let's look at the turnarounds. And of course, the most powerful turnaround is when I improve my performance, my boss is happy to have me employed here. Or even better, since I am now committing myself to improving my performance by the end of this week, my boss will be pleased to have me working here. Now, can you see that that gives this guy a completely different energy when he goes to work tomorrow morning?
Yes.
Because now he's not a victim. Now it's about what he shows up with. What is he going to do? Not feeling like a victim and feeling that no matter what he does, it's wrong.
Perfect example.
Yeah, very, very
One
important.
of 1,000 that she has, I'm sure. But
Yes, sure.
okay, so how would we go about using this skill to resolve a romantic situation?
Do you think we know one? Gigi and I could do this until, I don't know when, 40 years from now, we could still be talking about romantic turnarounds? Okay. So a very common one I hear is women who say to me, he's never going to propose. Now, I could say to them, look, I've had 14 marriage proposals, it's not a big deal, but that doesn't help you listening over there. That's my life, not your life. So let's look at the story. Let's do the turnaround. So my boyfriend, John, is never going to propose to me. She might have said to me. Okay, great. So do you believe that's true? Yes, no, or maybe? Well, sometimes they just say, no, of course it's not true. Great. So you can't tell that story again. You tell that story again, you're disempowering yourself, and you are actually putting a wedge in your relationship, which makes it less likely that John proposes, or in fact makes it impossible for John to propose. So you're never telling that story again. Okay, got it. So what's a story you might tell? John won't propose to me this year. Okay, so, we've got a lot of year left. So do you believe that's true? Yes, no, or maybe? And then she would say maybe. Okay, question number 2, what evidence do you have that John won't propose to you? Well, John told me he never wants to get married again. His first marriage was really painful. John told me that his divorce was really miserable and was very expensive. And right? Okay, those are real pieces of evidence that somebody would use that are about John. But guess what? They're about John and his ex-wife. They're not about John and this new girlfriend. So that I already know that I have this, angle. So question number 3, how do you feel when you tell yourself a story that John will never propose to you? Oh, she feels angry, she feels worried, and she feels sad. Who wouldn't? Okay. How will you feel when I can show you that the story isn't even true? Well, hopefulness is always a big one. So I'll feel hopeful, I'll feel excited, and then she'll probably say something cute like, I feel like planning my wedding, but that's not a feeling. So give me a feeling. What's a third feeling? Okay, well, hopeful and excited and relieved. Really relieved that she hasn't been going down this dead end for a couple of years. Okay. So how can we turn the story around? Well, very simple. If I'm the girl, or if I'm talking to her, this woman, when I meet more of John's needs, John proposes to me. Naturally. Yeah. If John isn't already married to somebody else, and John is dating you, and John is loving you, and you're loving him, John is only looking to see, can you meet enough of his needs consistently without having a reset button? A reset button is what happens when you have a habit of bickering or arguing or any one of a number of bad habits. That's a reset button. The guy says, well, I would have married her, but now we have to start all over again. Let me see if she's going to behave herself. Okay.
Well, there you go. Hey, girls, really, step up.
That's right.
Or guys, of course.
That's right.
Goes both ways.
Absolutely.